Welcome back to another episode of Swamp Stories. For this video, we cover a wild city that's never been covered before. This is the kind of city that you never think of, even if you live just 30 minutes away. Regardless, this story may be the wildest one I've ever covered. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. You can also follow the Instagram page as well. So let's get into it. If you're not familiar, Highway 1 is the scenic highway that connects Northern and Southern California. And every year, hundreds of thousands of people take this beautiful route on vacation. Well, as you make it north about an hour and a half from San Francisco, you stop by possibly the best region of the trip. The region is called Monterey County, and on a nice day, it's probably the closest thing to paradise. Along Highway 1, you pass by beautiful sand dunes and hills that overlook the ocean. And because of this, it's home to some of the most expensive real estate in the country. For the most part, Monterey County is vacation homes, Airbnbs, and old people kicking up their feet. But what if I told you that it's also home to one of the most dangerous cities in the state? Just 25 minutes east of Monterey is the city of Salinas. And believe it or not, this place is worse than Stockton, East LA, Long Beach, and even Richmond. It's the kind of place where staying inside is always a better idea than not. But it wasn't always this way, so let me explain the history. Since the start, Salinas has been an agricultural city, producing 70% of America's lettuce. And because of the agriculture, it's always been a city where migrants come to work and make a better life. Salinas was always low income, but for most of its history, it was a peaceful place to live. Families came with no money and within a few years had purchased a modest home and lived a decent life. Salinas was the true definition of the American dream. But then came the 1970s where everything began to change. For those who are unfamiliar, in the late 1960s, California prisons became divided into two sides, the Southern California-based La M and the Northern California-based NF. For the first few years, the battles and affiliations only took place within the facilities. But then in the 1970s, they began spilling over to the streets of California. NF became known as the Norteños and La M became known as the Sureños. Early on, the entire Northern California was Nortes, but then the Southsiders began creeping up. First, they went to cities like Richmond and San Francisco, but Salinas was left alone. And that's because Salinas had four of the strongest Norte sections in the state: Boronda, Santa Rita, East Market, and East Las Casitas. For years, they held down Salinas, but then they began not getting along. Once they all started beefing, the Southsiders saw an opportunity to come into Salinas. In the late 1990s, the Southsiders began rolling into town for real. It started off with a few members here and there and progressed into entire neighborhoods becoming 13s. First, the Vagos 13 took over the Alisal neighborhood of East Salinas. Then, Eldorado 13 took over the Hidden Ranch neighborhood up north. And most importantly, Hebron Street 13 took over the neighborhood across from East Market. Quickly, the numbers began looking like 60-40 when they used to be 95-5. Well, after a while, enough was enough, so three Northsider sections decided to put their pride to the side and come together. They figured that this was the only way to stop the growth of the Southsiders. So in the early 2000s, East Las Casitas, East Market, and Santa Rita, Bahamas all came together to form SNE. This was also known as the Enterprise, and their stated mission was to take back Salinas. They called this hunting, a process where anyone looking suspicious or wearing blue could be a target. And this is how Salinas became one of the most dangerous cities in the state. And sadly, East Las Casitas kicked things off in the worst way possible. August 27th, 2004. It's a Friday night in the Shadowbrook apartments, a complex controlled by ELC. Earlier in the day, an ELC member named Ruben Lopez drove to San Rafael to rob a Southsider member. Somehow the lick went bad and Ruben Lopez had to use his blower. And after evading the Marin County Sheriff, he made his way back to Salinas. Well, at sunset, he arrives to the Shadowbrook apartments and hands over his blower to fellow ELC member Mario Trujillo. And this is the guy who everyone fears in Salinas because of his wild ways. So handing it over to him was the worst decision possible. And of course, at midnight, Mario Trujillo decides to put it to use. 12 a.m. Mario Trujillo hops in his pickup truck and drives into the Zebra Street 13 territory. As he creeps down Pacific Avenue, he notices a man in blue fixing his taillight. So he gets out of his car and calmly walks up to the man. He asks, "What do you claim?" And then the man and his friends answer, "We're just racers, we don't bang." For whatever reason, Mario doesn't believe it and he says, "You look like scraps to me." And sadly, that's when he reaches for his waistband and makes his decision. Mario drives away and he throws his white hoodie into a parked pickup truck down the street. He then dumps his car into an abandoned parking lot and walks back to the Shadowbrook apartments. After police arrive to the scene, the friends of Juan Rea tell them to look for a white sweatshirt in the area. So one of the officers goes to look around and actually finds the hoodie in the back of the pickup truck. However, the lead investigator strangely told him that it wasn't evidence and that he needed to throw it in the trash. So that's exactly what he did, and Mario Trujillo got away with this because of the negligence by Salinas police. But then San Rafael police make up for everything. In early January of 2005, an arrest warrant was sent out for Ruben Lopez, and after turning himself in to Marin County Jail, he was placed in a cell with a confidential informant. The informant was playing the character of a fellow Norte, and he made Lopez feel comfortable. So Lopez revealed that the same tool he used in the robbery was also used in Salinas the same night. However, after numerous attempts to try to get him to say who did it, Lopez never cracked. Regardless, San Rafael police would send over the recordings to Salinas, and from here Salinas police would print out a list of ELC members and present them to Juan Rea's friends. They all simultaneously pointed at Mario Trujillo, and just like that, Mario's Salinas apartment was raided, and inside of his closet they found the tool that Lopez described. So you may be thinking that this was a case closed, but what you have to understand is that this is Salinas, where things are completely dysfunctional. Even with all this evidence, Mario Trujillo beat his case after a jury trial of 8-4. So just like that, he went back to his old life in the streets of Salinas. That was until 2007, when the courts discovered that the judge had written letters to the jury thanking them for their not guilty verdict. So because of this, Mario was to be tried for the same incident once again. This time, a new judge and jury sentenced him to 65 years to life. But the biggest takeaway from this trial is that Salinas police learned of SNE and their plans to take out the Southsiders. Regardless though, this trend would continue. September 2nd, 2008. It's a Tuesday evening in South Salinas, a neighborhood claimed by many Southsiders. And at 6:30 p.m., a man named Roberto Cervantes and his son Juan Cervantes are hanging out in their front lawn. And that's when a car full of Santa Rita SNE members rolls down the street. They notice Juan Cervantes, a certified Southsider member. And that's when the men roll down their windows and make a wild decision. Unfortunately, his father didn't make it, and Juan was understandably furious. So immediately he begins planning revenge. He quickly goes to the store and buys a red beanie and a 49ers jersey. This of course is to throw everyone off, both the cameras and the people he's looking to target. At 8:30 p.m, Juan arrives in Santa Rita and he drives around until he spots a group of men. And that's when he hops out and makes his emotional decision. After this incident, Juan would move to Arizona, where he would hide out for 10 years. Well, after losing a member, SNE decided to really group together as one. Here's who would step to the plate. First, you have Victor Skates, also known as Demon, a wild member from East Las Casitas. Then you have Daniel Chavez, also known as Youngster, another wild member from ELC. Next is Anthony Leck, another ELC member known for hitting banks. And finally, you have Antonio Cruz, a Santa Rita member so bad that when he comes around, everyone stares at the ground. And together, these four members went on an absolute tear starting in 2009. Up to this point, Salinas had broken their homicide record in back-to-back years. And by November, they had already broken their all-time record once again. According to police, 90% of it was attributed to SNE versus the Southsiders. And on December 2nd, 2009, SNE's newest crew would make their first statement. It's 5:30 a.m. in Santa Rita, and a young man named Jose Espinoza is getting ready for work. The previous year, Jose had graduated high school but decided to stay home and work and provide for his family. Well, while Jose is getting ready for work, the SNE members are lurking outside of his house. At 5:45 a.m., he leaves his house and walks towards his car. Little does he know that's where Antonio Cruz is waiting for him. According to police, Antonio Cruz thought that Jose was a Southsider when in fact it wasn't true. They believed he was only targeted because he lived in Santa Rita and was seen wearing blue. Unfortunately, the sad story became an everyday occurrence in Salinas. The formerly peaceful town was now a city where it's a risk to even leave your house. Well, after this incident, SNE would shift their focus to taking money. Together, they began planning missions to hit banks and jewelry stores all over the Salinas and San Jose area. In 2010, they hit Zales Jewelry in Gilroy, Rabobank in Santa Cruz, and Wells Fargo in Watsonville. After all this, it's estimated that they grossed over $500,000 in the summer of 2010. And after collecting all this money, they decided to go back to the streets of Salinas. November 10th, 2010. It's a random Wednesday afternoon in Salinas, and a popular East Salinas man returns home from Mexico where he spent a year in rehab. Well, that night, the man whose name is Jose Vasquez is in his wheelchair outside of his old house. The house happens to be located in the Cyber Street 13 area, just across from ELC. Well, coincidentally, Victor Skates and Daniel Chavez happen to be driving around the block. And while sliding down Orchard Avenue, Victor Skates notices an old Southsider from back in the day. So Daniel parks the car and Victor runs out. According to Salinas police, this was the 9th SNE body of the year and there was still a couple months left. Well, just 9 days later, the Santa Rita SNE members would make a move as well. November 19th, 2010. It's a Friday night in Salinas, and that means that it's party time. For El Dorado 13, they have a house party rocking on Arcadia Way. Well, through some female friends, Antonio Cruz gets word of the party and he sees it as a perfect opportunity. So he gets his tool, hops in his car, and goes on his way to pick up his SNE members. Together, they ride out to Arcadia Way looking for trouble. For 20 minutes, they sit outside the party until finally a man walks out. And that's when police say Antonio Cruz makes his move. Of course, they would get away with this once again, which made them feel untouchable, and that prompted them to make their biggest move yet. 3 days later, on November 23rd, they hit the Bank of the West in San Jose, and in the process, they walked away with $192,000 in cash. Not only were they causing destruction in the streets of Salinas, they were also walking away with a ton of cash. So for the next few years, they kicked up their feet and traveled the country. And while they were away, Salinas finally saw a peaceful couple of years. The homicide rate actually dropped from 20 per 100,000 down to 9 per 100,000 in 2011. And this was major progress for a city that had seen 3 years of absolute chaos. Well, after this crew of SNE kind of vanished, a new wild member would pop up. Let me introduce you to Charles Gutierrez, also known as Trigger. This guy was one of the most feared men in Salinas over the 2010s. Well, in the first week of August of 2015, he and East Market lost a fellow member. So a few days later, on August 7th, they all gathered around for his candlelight. Of course, everyone there is angry and on edge, especially Charles Gutierrez. Well, the candlelight takes place at the exit of Rancho Salinas, a local mobile home community. And inside the complex also happens to be another family gathering. A Mexican resident named Elliot Serna is in town to visit his mother. Of course, Elliot knows nothing about Salinas as he had never been before this trip. Well, at 10 p.m., Elliot and his cousins hop in their aunt's car and leave to get some tacos. As they try to leave the complex, the street is flooded with East Market members. The members will not move out of the way, and Charles Gutierrez actually walks up to the car window. He then asks Elliot what he claims, to which Elliot has no clue what to say. For whatever reason, Charles doesn't like his answer and he makes a terrible decision. Charles would be arrested after the incident and ultimately sentenced to 36 years. This was yet another case of mistaken identity in Salinas, and the FBI decided to step in to help. They opened an investigation into the entire SNE, which they called Operation Daybreak. On November 18, 2015, the FBI conducted dozens of raids around the Salinas area, and through confidential informants, the FBI was able to tie everything together. In total, they discovered 12 homicides between December of 2009 and November of 2010. On top of this, they collected $900,000 in all of the raids, and that's how they discovered all of the banks and jewelry stores they hit. The operation had 73 charges in total, which most were found guilty. This would be the end of SNE for good, and Salinas could finally rest. But as you would expect, this wouldn't last long. In fact, this next generation would come harder than ever before. After losing a couple members in 2016, all of the Norte sections in Salinas decided to come together. Just like before, ELC, East Market, and Santa Rita came together. But this time, 2 more sections would join their side. First, the Barondo Boys would join the Alliance. This is a reputable section on the west side of town. Then next, the Sons of Samoa from neighboring cities would join the Alliance as well. This is because they were having problems with the Southsiders as well. So with all these wild sections together, they decided to call themselves the Murder Squad. And ultimately, their mission was to quote, "Go hunting." The squad was led by a man named Siake Tavali, also known as Shocky. Shocky was a smart man who coordinated everything down to a T. For example, he always used 2 cars, one for police to chase and one that actually did the crime. On top of this, he would do things like dress in blue to disguise himself from his enemies. Well, the squad was made up of 11 members, led by Shocky. You have Christopher Purcell, also known as K-Dog, and also Anthony Valdez, also known as Hitter, both of which are Barondo Boys. Then you have Andrew Alvarado, also known as Oso, Anelu Tavale, also known as Angel, and John Magad, also known as Romeo. And lastly, you have Neil Palermo and Luisa Tede, also known as Reese's, both of which are the 2 youngest members. The squad came into existence on New Year's of 2017, and what they would do over the next year would devastate the city of Salinas. It all begins on January 12th, 2017. It's a Thursday night in Salinas, and word gets around of a Southsider party on Sunrise Street. So Shocky immediately calls a meeting with his squad. He then decides to put K-Dog and Hitter in one car and him and Oso in another. So in separate cars, they make their way down to the party. Shocky parks at the beginning of the street and K-Dog parks at the end. At midnight, Southsiders begin to leave the party, and that's when the men hop out of their cars. Both cars evaded successfully, however one of them actually flipped in total. However, Salinas police were somehow not notified. Of course, everyone would get away with this. And that takes us to February 11th, 2017. Shocky and his squad are now ready for their second mission, now targeting Hebron Street 13 in East Salinas. This time, they know they can't afford to make a crucial mistake like last time. Now they'll be arriving in 3 separate cars, 2 decoy cars and 1 stepper car. This car would be handled by the 2 youngest members, Reese's and Palermo, and police say that they had to do this for initiation. So at 7 p.m., the 3 cars head to the Hebron Community Center where there's a Southsider gathering, and that's when the 2 young members hop out. Sadly, this was not the intended target, so Shocky was furious and sent them to try again the next day. So by themselves, they would try again on February 12th. Thankfully, this time no one was hit, but on the way out, the members would end up crashing and totaling the car. And after panicking and not knowing what to do, they ended up calling Shocky's phone. Obviously, he was not happy about this, but he had no choice but to go pick them up. And this would be the last time that the squad dealt with Palermo and Reese's. Now we fast forward to March 24th, where a Santa Rita member would sadly lose their life. Shocky and his squad were not happy, so the next day they decided to go on a mission. This time it was Oso's turn to prove his worth. March 25th, 2017. Oso and Mark Anthony Garcia drive to the Vagos 13 area. As they go up and down the blocks, they finally see 2 men on their front lawn. So they park 20 yards from the house, take a deep breath, and hop out. They then chase the men through the house and into the backyard. This was a wild incident, and Oso would not be done yet. Less than 2 months later, he would spin back on the Vagos 13. May 13th, 2017. He drives around the Vagos area until he spots a man on Paloma Avenue, and that's when he hops out. This was wild, way too much going on in such a short period, and for this reason the squad decided to sit back and lay low. And just like that, the city of Salinas was just as quiet as it had ever been. That would be until 2 Barundo Boys members would pass away in the early summer of 2018. And unfortunately, this woke up the beast of the M Squad. June 11th, 2018. Romeo, Angel, and Hitter drive around all of the Southsider areas of the city, and at 10 p.m. they finally find a man standing outside in the Hebron 13 area, and that's when they make their move. And then the same guys would come back for their last mission. November 3rd, 2018. Hitter and Angel drive back to the Hebron area where they spot a man outside. Once again, this got so out of control that the FBI had to step in. So after 2 years of investigations, they figured everything out. All 11 members were arrested in October of 2020. Today, over half have been convicted and sentenced, while the others wait for their trial. So in case you didn't believe me, Salinas is one of the wildest places you could ever go to. And if you want to see what their rappers are about, check out some of these songs. Also, the entire indictment is available online if you want to check that out. But overall, wow, I don't even know what to say. If I grew up in this environment, I really wouldn't know what to do. Thankfully though, since 2018, Salinas has gotten much better. In the past few years, it's had crime rates similar to safe cities like San Francisco and San Diego. And on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Peace!